How you doing, Australia and New Zealand and a lot of other places as well? This is the NFL Brekkie Show for what now? Week 15, late December, games of consequence, the business end of the season. Tis the holiday season. This is when playoff spots are punched, dreams are shattered. And Laurie, Horesh, we are leading into Seahawks Eagles, the first ever Monday night flexed game. This game was originally scheduled for yesterday. Traded spots with the Chiefs and the Patriots. I would say mercifully, but that game ended up certainly not being the worst on the schedule. We'll talk about some of the takeaways there. But Laz, with the resurgence of Bills Mafia in our playoff consciences, we decided to go into the annals of the Brekkie Show history and pull out an old segment, one for the people.
We started this segment, this concept of Phil's Mafia, where we curate, put together, orchestrate, and organize our family in quotation marks, from the NFL characters, contenders, and key figures from the 2023 season, for the season in general. Now, disclaimer, and I pushed this out on social yesterday, I do want to say we started this before any certain quarterbacks got the start in the NFL that have brought on any sort of hand gestures or connotations to any stereotypes. But this has been part of it. We built our family, and part of it is really, you spend so much of this season, you watch so many games, you kind of get to distill it down as the season goes along, as you mentioned, as dreams are being made or broken at this point of the campaign. And it really distills down for us who we think are the genuine articles, who are the true tone setters, or really where we see this playoff picture going through, where the highway really leads, and then perhaps where we have some trust issues, where we're looking to the side a little bit as certain teams make their way up rankings, and then we take in that, look, in this season in particular, we've seen offensive down where we've really seen defense bite back and start to dictate terms in a whole lot more contests than we've been used to over the past decade. Which teams maybe aren't bona fide Super Bowl contenders? Maybe they don't have the ceiling to go and take the whole thing and head back to team headquarters with the Lombardi in February, but maybe they're the type of team that will leave an imprint and an impact upon you afterwards. After you go up against them, you will know, you will feel it. That's our muscle. But this all starts, I guess, Phil, there's no other way to start it. Let's talk about the top of the food chain, the Godfather. Who is the Godfather of the 2023 season? This is a mix. This can be a mix of teams, or it can be players or individuals if you think there is someone truly defining things at each tier. But let's start from the top, the Godfather. I'm going to go to the comment section quickly. Of course, Brad Bolt jumping in. Phil, he wants to know what shirt before we dive in. What are you rocking today? Phil's got
in honor of the 12th man, the Seahawks throwback. And now this used to be a division rival, my beloved Denver Broncos in the AFC West days. We're now 20-odd years removed from that. So just for, I don't know, competitive parity, I don't think the Seahawks are going to pull off a win. We'll get to that later in the show, what the markets are on this game with our popular demand segment. But just a little backing for the home side tonight, the game that'll feature on ESPN about a quarter afternoon. Laz, and I know you have some Seattle homage that goes a little bit further back.
Yeah, while we're on throwbacks, the Rain Man, Sean Kemp, one of the first superheroes of American sport that I took in. My dad had me collecting NBA cards from about the age of 4. I had my first Michael Jordan ball pretty a couple years earlier than that, working on what would eventually be a decent, if somewhat slow release left-handed jump shot from a young age. But yeah, Sean Kemp is one of the figures of my childhood, and obviously repping the very bittersweetly held Seattle.
Lost your mic, Laz.
And I was just caught up so much in the nostalgia there that I just had to be taken off into the distance there. But we're back. So yeah, Sean Kemp for me, as we make sure all the audio is working and zooming away perfectly here. All right, so let's start with Godfather, Phil. We've touched on fashion here for a second. Let's talk about who the Godfather of the NFL season is. Who sticks out to you as the defining top of the food chain character of the 2023 campaign so far?
Laz, on the day of a Seahawks home game, I'm going to a team that, as the great Frank Costello once said, no one gives it to you. You have to take it. And there isn't a team for me that, when healthy, takes it from the opposition like the San Francisco 49ers. This team averages 6.79 yards per play. You can round it up to 6.8 if you want. That's the fourth highest ever in a season. This is a team whose identity has been terrific defensive football. But you look at the bevy of stars they have offensively. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel. First time we've ever had teammates that both had 5 receiving and 5 rushing touchdowns in the same season. So you have McCaffrey, you have Samuel. Brandon Ayuk has been a magnificent option. George Kittle, to me, on any day, is the second best tight end in the NFL. You can make an argument for Mark Andrews. I wouldn't fight you there, but he's also hurt. But then Brock Purdy bringing it together. Criticism that he's a product of the system. Yet again, this product of the system threw for 4 touchdowns, no picks. Third time this season he's done that. Ties the franchise record with, among others, Steve Young. But Laws, it's what he's doing outside the numbers. Throws that aren't as simple. 75% completions on the season, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception. This team rips man defense to shreds. And then even when they go against zone-happy sides, they figure out a way to dominate. Yes, the run defense was a little taken advantage of yesterday against the Cardinals. 234 rush yards allowed, most for the Niners since 2017. I did want to address that caveat. Arik Armstead, Javon Hargrave, both absent for the 49ers. I know Hufanga's done for the year. That's a big loss. But with what they have going at linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, what they have going in the secondary, and just their incendiary offense, when healthy, and I only point to 2 guys. Trent Williams missed 3 games. Deebo Samuel missed 2.8 games. And they were the same 3 games. Those are San Francisco's 3 losses. Other than that, they've beaten everybody. Their biggest test of the season is 1 week from today, Christmas night, locally in San Francisco, when the 49ers come, or when the Ravens come to town to face the 49ers. But for me, the Godfather of the NFL is the 49ers. I do sense some dissension on the other side of the Pacific and the Tasman.
No, not dissension. I agree with you, but I disagree a little bit, or I agree with you and I pivot. I'm going to go more singular with this, and I think the Godfather of the 2023 season is Kyle Shanahan. I think what he has designed and created, and this full version of it, with, you mentioned health permitting, with Deebo Samuel healthy and firing again, with what Brandon Ayuk has ascended to, with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams in an offensive line that, over the past few years, the 49ers offensive line hasn't been consistently healthy or dominant. They've had weak spots there, and this is certainly one of the better versions of that line. And with how he's got Brock Purdy playing, we'll touch into a little MVP stuff in a little bit down the track. But all I will say is that Brock Purdy is not Jimmy Garoppolo. Brock Purdy is more than Jimmy Garoppolo. Brock Purdy, yes, there's open receivers. Yes, there's amazing yak. Okay, great. There's also throws to open receivers that are there because he uses his athleticism and his second phase ability, his second play creation ability to roll out, to escape pressure, and to find someone, Christian McCaffrey, stumbling, falling over, tripping over himself, wide open, so open that he could get up and race in for a touchdown. It's such a well-designed offense. It's putting players into position to succeed, or in position to succeed at a rate we've never seen before. They've broken all the metrics. So you want to go jump in, and the fact that where they are at EPA per play, where they are at yak, but also where they are, like, you still having quarterback completing, and you look at things like CPOE, completion percentage over expectation. Brock Purdy still routinely ranks very high up in the elite category of that. So it's well designed, and he's executing and achieving and delivering with accuracy at a well above average rate. So we'll dive into some MVP stuff a little bit later. And honestly, 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in a week where Lamar didn't wow from a statistical standpoint, at least through the air.
He had a couple highlights, though. He did have a couple highlights.
He did. He certainly did. Isaiah Likely, how you doing? Dak Prescott certainly had a slide back game. The whole Cowboys offense, the whole Cowboys operation did. We'll touch on that in a bit. And Josh Allen got a victory in a big spot, but Park with 7 completions and 15 dropbacks. So Purdy helps himself in that situation. But when you go in and look at those 4 touchdowns and the no interceptions, go look, it's inextricably tied. And that comes back to Kyle Shanahan. That's who I want to heap some praise on here, because this thing is, I want to say it's poetry in motion. It's just the efficiency, the brutal efficiency, and the alleys that are opened up in the run game, the spacing that's created, and then the individual talent then takes advantage of it. it's something to be marveled at, and we should be absolutely enjoying this. Can't wait for that battle against the Ravens. You hope it's a healthy Ravens team that they go up against, because there were some banged up moments there for the Baltimore squad. But Kyle Shanahan, for me, is the key top dog figure of this NFL season, the defining Godfather-like figure for the 2023 campaign. And we are seeing his vision come to full fruition in devastating fashion.
Yeah, there's a comment from Brad Bolt I think is worth throwing on screen, Laws. It says, if Purdy were a second-round pick, he would get more respect.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. The thing is, Brock Purdy's college CV didn't justify a second-round pick. He was firmly in a day 3 position. In fact, had he not been selected by the 49ers, he would have famously been an undrafted free agent. He was Mr. Irrelevant, the final pick chosen in the 7th round of that draft.
It's the same with Dak Prescott, to be honest. Dak Prescott, a 4th-round comp
pick out of Mississippi State. But Dak had objectively a better college career. Brock Purdy was interception happy.
Yes.
Kyle Shanahan, it's the perfect marriage of system and player development and execution, and it coming together harmoniously to where you have an historically efficient season. I mentioned 6.79 yards per play. It is only the greatest offenses we've seen. And in the Super Bowl era, you just want to go to yards per attempt. Brock Purdy's tied with Kurt Warner from The Greatest Show on Turf for most yards per attempt. And I want to touch on this yards after completion conversation, because you see it a lot, just padding his stats with Yak. If you go through the last 4 league MVPs, the last 4, Brock Purdy would rank, if he wins it, he's odds on to do it at the moment, he would rank 4th of those 4 in terms of yards after catch over the course of the season. So we've seen other quarterbacks, or Patrick Mahomes, benefit from yards after the catch more so than Purdy. It's just that they're better players. They're all pro caliber players, or, Christian McCaffrey's sense, probably the most dynamic running back we've seen out of that backfield since Marshall Faulk, that are doing these things that are discrediting what Purdy's doing. But I think everybody's okay with that. You see Purdy talk post-game. It doesn't seem like he needs the credit from the ego to get that. He's okay to block out that criticism on social media, execute, not lose a game when Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams, who's his harmony with Christian McCaffrey as left tackle and running back, when they run left, they're averaging over 7 yards per carry. They are just a devastating unit, an absolute wagon. And that's why, for me, I think it's a perfect nod to make, if this is the Godfather, then, the Kyle Shanahan can be the Don.
The buy-in that he's got as well. We talk about these figures, whether you're watching The Departed, The Godfather, whether you're watching Goodfellas, whether you're watching Sopranos, whatever it is that's taking our inspiration here. You talk about the buy-in that you want to see from the rest of the family. And when you've seen the highlights in recent weeks of Brandon Ayuk on the first play of the game, a 72-yard run. This is last week for Christian McCaffrey, and Ayuk is downfield. He's downfield at the goal line looking for blocks the entire way, sprinting down, incredibly fired up. So fired up, I think, that he didn't even high-five McCaffrey after the run. He was just fist-pumping and, looking towards the sideline. And then in this game, you've got George Kittle, who's an all-pro talent and has had some of the most prolific receiving seasons we've ever seen from a tight end in the NFL. And yet you've got him combining with other tight ends out on the edge, and Trent Williams, on the move, just opening up creases for Christian McCaffrey. I've never seen at times Christian McCaffrey is a fast guy that looks like he's going so slow, because he seems to have options about which gaping alley he'd like to run through and pick up yards. So, look, I think we're in lockstep, just walking on slightly different sides of the same street here. You're giving it the Niners, I'm giving it to Kyle Shanahan, but they are very much deserved of the Godfather status. Let's move on to the next one. Made men. These are bona fide characters. These are the genuine article that we know these are contenders that will be there, deserve to be there, have a completeness and a trust within them that has earned that level of respect within the house.
Laws, for me, there are 3 made men.
Okay.
And I'm going to go to of them. I'll call them the underboss. They're the closest ones to being the Godfather. You got the capos, you got a couple capos, and you got the underboss.
The Aries?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's it depends on the family. Underboss, capo, it's kind of all branches out from there. For me, it's the Ravens who are the one level below the 49ers. And it's crazy to say that a team that has led in the last 2 minutes of every game is not the Godfather. It's just, I do think the 49ers are going to beat the Ravens by a touchdown next week. And that's no disrespect to Baltimore. They capitalized on every opportunity yesterday in that win over the Jags on the road. But Laz, this team, they play from the front in a way that is frankly rare in the NFL. I mentioned the leads in the last 2 minutes. They have led, it's a 60-minute game. They've led for an average, not tied, led for an average of 44 minutes and 2 seconds per game for the season. If the season stopped right now, that'd be third best in NFL history behind only the 72 Dolphins, the only team in the Super Bowl era to not lose a game, and the 2016 Patriots, who won a Super Bowl, Super Bowl 51, the famous 28-3 comeback. Number 3 is this year's Ravens. Number 4, the aforementioned greatest show on turf. And number 5, the 2007 Patriots, who went 17-0 and famously 19-1, lost in the Super Bowl. So I've named 5 teams. You pull the Ravens out, that's 4 teams left. 3 won the Super Bowl, 1 made it there and was upset. And all the credit goes to, for me, Lamar Jackson. It's great to see a guy, he and Tua alike, who we came in with understandable durability questions. Can this guy hold up for a full 16-game season? Take Tua out of it. I'm sure we'll talk about him at some point in this show. Lamar Jackson's subtle movement and his development in the pocket is art. And it's not like it. We talked about it on the Blitz for 4 minutes yesterday with Alex Smith. But when pressured, his EPA last year was 30th. This year, it's 3rd in the NFL when under pressure. This team with him at the centerpiece, with a defense that ranks number 1 in the NFL in points per game allowed, yards per play allowed, and sacks, and then a running game spearheaded by Jackson. Keaton Mitchell, it's a shame because that looks like a significant knee injury he suffered. But whether it's Gus Edwards or any one of their other running back options that can just kind of like put a cookie cutter in, they know the build they need to make this execute. Their pre-snap motion is, can you imagine being a linebacker and seeing a guard pull, a wide receiver coming on a jet sweep, a tight end come across, and then a zone read with Lamar Jackson? What the hell do you do? I don't, the Jags didn't know. 251 rush yards, 204 of them were in the second half, and lost 155 of the 204. So about 75% were before contact. That is the most rush yards before contact in any half of any game since ESPN began tracking that in 2009. For a team that plays from the front and runs the ball that well, that is a devastating combination.
I'm in lockstep with you here. I think Baltimore Ravens make the most sense here. They are right at the top there of that, whether you want to call it the conciliary tier level, but of the made men. Their completeness as a roster, and ideally you're starting to see some issues there in protection, I think, on the offensive line, whether you want to look at health or form there from the offensive line. But it wasn't their most dominant performance. I think the Jags did a good job up against them, creating some pressure and some key downs and putting Lamar Jackson, as you mentioned some of the numbers before, but putting him under a little bit of heat. His second phase ability was absolutely unbelievable. I'm still getting over the Isaiah Likely play, but I'm not going to beleaguer the point too much. We've talked about the Ravens a bunch, talked about Lamar Jackson a bunch. I remain steadfast there. My pick to emerge from the AFC and face the 49ers in the Super Bowl was that way before week 1, remains that way now. Can I kick over to my second team that I have belonging here? And I think this may...
I have a couple who are in that made man category. The Ravens were a step above. We can go to the consigliaries, the capos, whatever you want to call them.
This team... I think this team, in the future does have the chance to be ahead of a family. I think we've seen some moments of weakness this season, and we've seen them overcome some adversity in this past week. But I'm putting the Miami Dolphins in the made man category for me. And it's not because of the offense. It's actually because of the defense. Over the past month, this defensive team that early in the season had, think about their games up against teams like the Buffalo Bills or the Philadelphia Eagles. They were exposed. They had their moments where they were taken advantage of and overpowered. But over the past month, no team has created more defensive EPA than the Miami Dolphins. And you can look at that from an efficiency standpoint. You can look at that a totality standpoint. What they're doing in coverage, what they're getting up front, even with Jalen Phillips gone, but what you're getting from Bradley Chubb, a former friend of yours I know, who comes out and has an absolute sack party against the Jets. And yes, it's the Jets offense, but this has been a trend. This is why I'm not referencing 1 week. I'm referencing the past month of football. What are you getting from Christian Wilkins? The contributions across the board, even having lost someone so key as Jalen Phillips, the way they're marrying up since Jalen Ramsey's come back, since they've got health on the back end in the secondary there. And now we're talking about the multiple ways that they can attack and limit receivers in different styles of coverage, whether you want to put someone on, just in one-on-one blanket coverage, or whether you want to get creative, what fans you can work with down there. it's the defense that has me thinking about this Miami Dolphins team as one of the made men. We know what they can do on offense, and credit to them. The thing about playing the Jets is the Jets are a good defense, but you're going to get lots of opportunities and reps against them because of where their offense is at, right? Yeah. Because their offense isn't going to be able to sustain drives and points, you're going to have the opportunity to try and again. They did this without Tyreek Hill coming into this game, and Jalen Waddle stepped in for 142 yards and a touchdown, and a vintage deep shot Miami Dolphins special for the touchdown there. But the crossing routes and his ability to create yards after contact, his ability to create separation. They showed what they can do against a good defense without their absolute top MVP consideration candidate, Tyreek Hill. The running game wasn't its most prolific, although if you had Raheem Mostert, a couple of touchdowns is not going to hurt you. They will continue to get work Devon Achane into this contest more and more and more. Perhaps I was a little overeager last week in how much I thought they'd get him involved since his return from injury after a step up after his first week back. But look, I think all in all, from the four speedsters, and they will have Tyreek Hill back soon, you'd think the four speedsters they have, the level with which Tua is playing, and the way the defense is playing, they are a made man for me. That the concern would be the offensive line, which is not as its strongest and hasn't had full health throughout the season, but that is still that's something you're gonna have to turn to Mike McDaniel for. Talk about another feather in their bow. It's the coaching ability there. How they're going to combat that. How they're going to combat the better pass rushers they come up against in the AFC, and there are a list of them. If you think about the teams that have had productive fronts, we just got finished talking with the Ravens, but the Miami Dolphins belong in this tier for me, not because of 70-point outings a couple of months ago, but what we've seen from the defense that has been ascending and has literally been one of the elite, if not the elite unit over the past month of football.
Yeah, Laz, if I told you a defense in the NFL was number 5 in terms of yards per game allowed and number 2 in sacks, you're thinking 49ers, Ravens, Browns. It's the Dolphins. They are number 5 in yards, total yards allowed, number 2 in sacks. I mean, they allowed 4 more total yards in the first half than you and I gained in that game. It was overwhelming. And to quote the great Frank Costello again, I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. The Dolphins, when their offensive line is the concern, what do? You get the ball out of Tua's hands quickly. 2.08 seconds on average per throw. The fastest he has gone in his career, and obviously the fastest the Dolphins have gone in a game this season. When Tua released the ball in that game inside of 2.5 seconds, 16 of 19 passing, 7 of 8 targeting Jalen Waddle. The only exception was the 60-yard touchdown. So when he does have that extra half beat and can beat you over the top, typically it's been Tyreek Hill. In this game, it was Jalen Waddle on that 60-yard touchdown, and that was his only target after 2.5 seconds. So how do you mitigate an offensive line that has been at times porous despite continued investment and the approval of the EQB DB? Well, we get the ball out of our hand quickly. We win pre-snap. Mike McDaniel, no coincidence, in the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, coming over from San Francisco, bringing Raheem Mostert with him, a guy who has more touchdowns this season, 20, than he had in his 8 years in the NFL before this, 19. That is the first time ever somebody has had more touchdowns in one season after even 4 years total anywhere else. And Mostert doubled that. 8 years, 19 touchdowns, 1 year, 20 touchdowns, a perfect marriage, and a team that, if the chips fall correctly, I think on a given day can beat a team like the Ravens, and can 60 Minutes, who knows what happened, but they have a very real chance of winning the Super Bowl. They just have to win 2 out of the last 3. This team does struggle on the road.
Yep.
And if they win 2 out of the last 3, however they do it, and it's not easy. They got Dallas, Baltimore, Buffalo. That is a hell of a finish. They win 2 of those, they're in the Super Bowl. Or sorry, they win the AFC East. They get home games. They get good seeding. If they don't, it's going to be a hard time making it to the Super Bowl. And it's something's got to give next week, Laws. The Cowboys have been criticized for not beating any teams with winning records. The Dolphins have 1 win over a team with a winning record. Those two meet in South Beach. One of the games of the weekend with a loaded schedule Christmas weekend. And
Todd Archer pointed out today on the social medias that the Dallas Cowboys are the only team since the start of last season, that hasn't lost back-to-back, hasn't lost consecutively. And yet, after what we saw in their run defense, and we consider what Mike McDaniel can cook up with Achane and Mostert back there, I mean, like you said, something's got to give. Okay, that's
I don't think yards
man.
after contact are going to be as much of a concern next week, though. But then
I
again,
don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. Like Dan
while
Quinn.
we're talking about muscling inside the tackles, let's go to another category, shall we?
Okay, sure. Unless you had another made man you wanted to throw in there, because you said you had 3.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about him later, but for me, it's Dallas. And we'll talk about why. I don't think the score was reflective of how that game went. And this isn't discrediting Buffalo at all. They played their best game of the season. They picked a very good day to have a very good day. But you don't get that boneheaded roughing the passer on the first drive. That's 3 points, not 7. You have there's technique to blocking a punt. They did everything right except you don't jump. You run through the hoop.
Jump like you Cam Chancellor trying to jump over the line of scrimmage.
If you run through the hoop, that is either a punt, your worst case scenario, or a blocked punt.
It should have been
the doorstep. Instead, drive extended. That's 14 points for the Bills when it shouldn't have been more than 3. And then the Bills choked the game away. All credit to them. But that was a couple boneheaded first half plays that a good team capitalized on. But had Dallas not made those miscues, that game's a lot more competitive.
He also had a second and forever passing completion that Josh Allen sailed over his target. It should have been 3rd and 19, but Jaron Kearse correctly called for the contact he made up above personal foul, which turns what would have been 3rd and forever to a first down, which also led to touchdown points and a missed fumble review that Mike McCarthy, whilst you heard from those who were on the Cowboy side that said that they couldn't see it, and it was really hard to tell. I would think that my players screaming, "Hey, there's a fumble," and Stephon Diggs bolting to the line of scrimmage saying, "Get the snap off," might have been a red alert to me to get a little red flag out and peg it onto the field. We'll get to the Cowboys a little bit later. But you've really, you started to trigger me there. I might think that as maybe close to made men, maybe we're thinking Joe Pesci, Goodfellas, taking a drive. This time it was Mike McCarthy. Some talk about contract extension buzz that morning. You got an MVP front runner in your building. At the start of the day, you've finally beaten the winning team, the Eagles. You're on the road. Could be a crowning game in a very historic kind of contest, and not exactly what Pesci saw coming in Goodfellas, and not exactly what Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys saw coming. All right, muscle, Phil. Where else would we start with this content than with you? So go for it.
Well, there are a couple options for muscle. And to describe the muscle, this is a team that very unlikely to reach a Super Bowl. But you do not want to meet them in a dark alley in January. You do not want this team, this wild card team, coming to your town for a home game. And again, any playoff team, even the ones that are 9-8 deserve some respect. But this is a team that even if you win, you are just going to hate life for 60 minutes. This is the black and blue football game that we're going to get. A couple teams here qualify for different reasons. Last year, Laz, our muscle team was the New York Giants. And what happened in the playoffs? They went on the road and won a playoff game. So for me, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. And yeah, there's a lot to be said about 4 QBs for 9 wins. Joe Flacco throwing for 212 in the fourth quarter. But I like that dog, like a dog on the bone, that defense, which all year has been just terrifying. Myles Garrett, any given day, the best defensive player in the NFL. They pressured Justin Fields 20 times, a 44% pressure rate. And Fields, against pressure, 5 for 17 for 19 yards. So you get 20 pressures, 19 pass yards, 3 sacks, and an interception. And it gets dicey late. They're coming from behind. They're not incapable of moving the ball. You want to talk about somebody who's built like the muscle. David Njoku, 6 catches, targets for 86 yards in the fourth quarter. He had a touchdown in the first quarter. Of course, the one game I don't pick him on my anytime touchdown prop, or the 2 games the last 2 weeks, I picked him for weeks before. And then finally I had enough of it, and he goes back-to-back games with the touchdown. But David Njoku and the Browns, this team's looking like they're going to be that 5, maybe 6 seed in the AFC. That means they're going on the road to a Jacksonville or a Miami or a Kansas City. Those are tough outs for any of those teams. If the dogs come to town, the old adage in football, defense travels, and that is a hell of a defense. That is muscle I do not want to see in January.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The Cleveland Browns are exactly who I had circled here. Yeah, you got Joe Cool at the top there, but what the defense leaves you with, this is, you might even get some lucky shots in against them when you see that someone like Grant Delpit, who they lose, and yet with the return, Denzel Ward getting healthy and getting back into this thing and helping out in the secondary, you got Newsom playing with swagger back there. You mentioned Myles Garrett, some of the physicality up front. You will know that you have played the Cleveland Browns, win or loss. However this goes, no, I don't think they've got a Super Bowl, a Super Bowl ceiling, but they do have a professional quarterback there that is keeping them on track. Even Kareem Hunt, there's a physicality through it.
By the way, Joe Flacco, Laz, if you go back 25 years and you rank the top 5 playoff runs for quarterbacks, Joe Flacco, the year the Ravens won it, Super Bowl 48, absolutely qualifies to be included in that conversation. He was He was on 14 touchdowns, no picks through those playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
He knows how to elevate his game at the most important time of the year.
See how many throws he's got left in that right arm and that right shoulder. But look, no team fits this more perfectly. There's some others that I thought about. The LA Rams.
Who else did you think? The Rams are on my list.
The Rams, yeah. Because they are running the ball, they're designing the runs well, and Kyren Williams is running with power, and he is not fun to tackle. He had a couple of fumbles.
And Cooper Kupp is outside the numbers, is finally a threat again. The last 2 weeks, he's spread the field, causing defenses to spread a little bit, giving Kyren Williams a little more breathing room.
It hasn't been the Puka Nacua show. It has been, DeMarcus Robinson has had some fantastic moments. Cooper Kupp, I would advise with Cooper Kupp, this is a controversial take, and I'm not trying to get in trouble here, but I would advise having someone within 30 yards of coverage against him. It's a radical thought. I'm not trying to get in trouble here, but just something to consider when you're tackling the Rams.
Postal code.
Look, the Rams,
not all that
the Rams to me I didn't include here because I think the Browns perhaps a little less multi-dimensional, and I think the Rams have a higher ceiling. And I'll touch on that in a little bit, but I think the Rams are playing fantastic football. Matthew Stafford, no surprises to see where he's found himself for the past month. Football in terms of EPA sitting nice and high, and then also what he's done attacking deep down the field. Once again, you're looking at completion rate up and around the high 50s and 60% mark throughout the season and in recent weeks, which has him sitting nice, up in the top 3-4 of those categories. So there's so much arm talent left with Matthew Stafford. His ability to pick up chump gains at will, the design of the run game, the physicality they play with, and they're getting some cattle back as well. There's a lot to like about the Rams, but I just think they're a little more multi-dimensional and perhaps have more grand illusions. Where the Browns are out, though, that is your muscle. You will know when you have gone up against David and Njoku in the passing game, or when you have gone up against Myles Garrett in that defensive front, or where you have dared to test them through the air, because they have players that have explosive physicality, speed, and ball hawking nature back there. So, yes, a lot to like there.
Rob, a name I'm going to throw in.
Mm-hmm.
It might be controversial, but I'm not saying it for controversy's sake.
Unlike you.
A team that for me, they're not made. They're still muscle, despite all people are starting to say, hey, this might be the second best team in the AFC. I have the Bills as muscle. Okay. I have the Bills as a team you don't want to face in the first round. I just don't see how they win 3 games away from Buffalo in January. They're 2-5 away from Western New York this year. And take the logo off the helmet. I tell you, a team ran 71% of their design plays in a primetime game, in a national TV game, most in the NFL this season. 266 rush yards, 120 after contact. That is muscle. And it's a team that new offensive coordinator 4 games ago, a team that has been mistake prone. And despite their very positive scoring margin, just kind of that middling record, they got a huge win in the last 2 weeks by the slimmest of margin, by Kadarius Toney's shoe size. And then some of the things we talked about in the first half, that was a slim margin. They didn't beat the Cowboys by a slim margin. They handled them. But they capitalized on some mistakes in the first half that if they go to a Miami or a Kansas City in the first round or in the second round of the playoffs, that can cost that team. But for me, the Bills are more muscle than made.
And that's fair enough. I think, there's going to be a lot of talk about their ceiling here and how dangerous they are in the AFC picture. Honestly, I have similar expectations.
They look all season like they did yesterday. I take it back, but I've watched this team for 14 games. And you can't say, oh, on their best day, this is who they are. This is their
I have
ceiling.
I have a similar range of expectations for them as I do with the Rams. I think the Rams have been playing more consistent, good defensive football throughout this season. But what I will say is that the reason I think there's merit to what you say about Muscle is just the way that they've played. They have established a run game, the way that offensive line played, the way the running attack went, and it wasn't just as much as James Cook was an absolute ghost nightmare. You're also getting Ty Johnson, who was over 6 yards a clip, playing with probably he's got more power than what Cook was just slicing and dicing his way. So yeah, there was certainly some muscle to what we saw from the Buffalo Bills. The hype is going to go wild. They're going to soar up Super Bowl odds. We're going to see them as like a 7th seed with maybe the second best money market on the AFC side of things in the playoff picture. But anyway, all right, muscle done. Let's go to our last one because we're past the half-hour mark here. We've got Benny G topping to say, good morning, gentlemen. I do want to just bring this up. I brought it up on screen, but I will say, Brad, and he did, I know there's a typo in here. We know who you mean. Dolphins yesterday were like Michael Corleone and Godfather 2, and the Jets were Fredo on the lake. So we appreciate really embracing the movie themes there. Benny G, good morning. All right, let's get to the rat. This is one I tossed and turned with, but I'm going to throw it to you first, Phil. Who have you got? Last year we sniffed it out correctly. We nailed it. We said the Vikings were the rat. And that came to fruition in the playoffs. Who you got?
Laws, there were two teams. There were two teams that came to mind that jumped out straight away. One more so than the other. Honestly, for me, it was both halves of last year's Super Bowl. Those are the rest.
I love it. So spicy.
But I'm going to focus on Kansas City because what does the rat do? Subtle sabotage. You got to be subtle about it. You got because if not, you'll be sniffed out, right? But you can't let the thing progress. You get in your own way just enough. You show up late after the bust happened. Oh, sorry, I was stuck in traffic. The Chiefs still, even though they went to New England and scored 27 against a good defensive team, we were worried about this team's offense, and they get 27 against the Patriots. Not a lot of teams can do that. Still, 3 drops. They're up to 32 on the season. That is the worst in the NFL. And they were key. They weren't, hey, 1st and 10, a little, screen that, oh, shoot, it fell through my hands. This was Travis Kelce in the end zone. This was Kadarius Toney, like a circus seal, threw his hands off his helmet, juggling it to a defender. And Patrick Mahomes finally had the meltdown on the sideline. This is the most penalized offense in the NFL. And this offense, I mentioned how great the Browns' 44% pressure rate was against the Bears. The Chiefs allowed 43% pressure in this game against the Patriots, most they've allowed to any opponent in the last 2 years. They got it done over the line, right? Because as the rat, you still got to get the result early. But Patrick Mahomes is 300 yards. It was 10 for 10 on screens. It was 7 for 7 targeting running backs. It wasn't those receiving options, not named Travis Kelce, even with Taylor Swift in the house, to get the job done. For me, the Chiefs have a little just like that concern that they're going to sabotage things at the costliest time in the playoffs. They're my rat.
It's a great take. It's one I'm not entirely on board with because there's so much made pedigree within that Chiefs. Chiefs.
Hey, Frank Costello was an FBI informant, right?
I was.
And Patrick Mahomes, you wouldn't think maybe he's not in on it.
And I watched that game closely. Mahomes had so many good plays there. So many, even the first interception where you're targeting a big body tight end, you don't expect. It's one thing if a DB shows the quickness to cross the face and get in front of the tight end to pick it off, but he kind of went through. It's like, man, if I'm throwing you a ball to your chest as a tight end or up high right here, I expect you to be able to use the frame and not have it wrestled away from you. I am painting. I don't think, Phil, here's the problem. I don't smell a rat. I smell 2. And they're in the same division. I've got the whole NFC East here as the rat. I think we've got a little conglomerate going on here. I think they've been making moves. I think quietly, like you said, subtle, right? Who would you ever thought would band together and be a pair of rats in this thing than the Eagles and the Cowboys who can't stand each other? Yeah. But I've got the NFC East, and namely those two, because those are the two we're talking about here. I've got those two as both as rats. I don't, and you guys know where my heart beats when it comes to football, but I went into this thinking, I've been harping on the Detroit Lions and their suspect defense. I'm going to
And
rewatch that game.
To that point, I wanted to say the Jags are the rat. I mean, Trevor Lawrence dropping the ball as he's running, just out of nowhere, 2 missed field goals. Those are rat activities. But I don't think anybody's pegging the Jags on the short list of Super Bowl favorites, right?
Not
Nobody's
anymore.
surprised if they sabatage things.
The Cowboys I've got both the Cowboys and the Eagles. I went into this really, really questioning the Lions. I talked recently about, they had on a 6-game streak, 5 of them they'd conceded 26 plus points or more. In the game they didn't was against the Raiders. Okay. Better defensive showing against the Denver Broncos. They didn't get dragged down into a style of football you're very familiar with now. That's Sean Payton nicely taking you into deep water, frankly, taking you down into a muddy scrap of 3-yard runs and just a tussle for a 17
in a marsh, as it were.
So I went in not with preconceptions, but that's where I'd been with the Lions of late. That Lions offense, with the way the offensive line is playing, with, yes, the dual threat running game that we know, Sam Laporta that we know, but now you're seeing Jamison Williams playing more complete football, more confident football as a receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we know Josh Reynolds is going to give you chunk plays. Jared Goff just firing absolute howitzers over the middle, just really picking apart the big chunk gains to any number of players. There was so much to like there. And when I think about the NFC, I think about 2 things. One, maybe the Lions are the team that go, hey, who knows what we do on offense? Maybe we just get really weird with it and try and get creative against a team like 49ers if we face them. And let's try and win this game 49 to 45. Maybe they are the offense, given that what they've got the multitude of weapons, passing and running, and the offensive line. Maybe they're the team that can stop that 49ers front enough to stay on schedule with their offense. Maybe they're the ones that can get creative. And I think against the 49ers, you need to give them eye candy. One thing we saw from the Kyler Murray-led Cardinals is that when they kept that thing within 1 score and were able to suggest both run, pass, not just through Connor, but also Kyler Murray running himself, they did a good job giving lots of eye candy, lots of things to look at for Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw at the second level. If you want to open up short yardage throws, if you want to open up windows over the middle, you want to open up those type of aerial attack moments, you need to get them moving side to side. You need to give them eye bait to look at, and you need to move them side to side, attack some of the edges. I think they did a good job. I think the Lions are a team that perhaps could do that. They're clever enough. They're well coached enough. They're talented enough. They have the offensive line to do it. And then I think about these other 2 teams, right? I told you why I'm talking about the Lions when I said the rat is the Eagles and the Cowboys. Now think about how they match up. The Cowboys, safety players dropped off. Linebacker players dropped off. Leighton Vander Esch being out was felt massively yesterday. Devon Clark got hurt and also had a shocking game. So the center, the spine of that Cowboys defense is highly suspect. They've had to move Deron Bland outside with Trayvon Diggs. That's where we know that Lions can get after you and pepper you and pepper you and pepper you, and they overmatch. Now, talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. It hasn't been necessarily as much through injury or decline in players that were there before, but they changed over that personnel at linebacker, changed over the personnel at the nickel spot and the safety spot, and it has not come off well. They have been had over and over again. I think the Lions, at this point of the season, I think they match up so well from an offensive standpoint against both those teams, the Eagles and the Cowboys. I don't trust the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think they're built to play in front, and when they go from behind, we see what it looks like. Cowboys did it to the Eagles a week ago, and then they had that done right back to them, and worse, by the Buffalo Bills this week. I don't trust either of them. We've seen what the Niners have done to both of them, and now I think about what the Lions, where the rosters are at this day and age, how they match up. This is not where I thought I was coming to this, but I spent a lot of time last night really watching closely at what we were seeing, and I think I have more belief in the Lions as true bona fide presence in the NFC. And I think head-to-head against the Eagles and the Cowboys, they'd expose either one of them. The rat, for me, the NFC East, and particularly those 2 teams in Dallas and Philadelphia.
Laz, simply, I included the Eagles in as one of my 2 rats, just because the profile. They're a better team than the Vikings were a year ago, but just eking out these 1-score games time after time, where it seems like, this team up until last week was outscored in the first half for the season. For the season, they were behind in the first half, and they were hitting overs. So it's like they're scoring, but the other team's just outscoring them. That is rat behavior. The Vikings last year 11-0 in 1-score games in the regular season. The Eagles this year 7-1 in 1-score games. It's a short list of multi-score games that they've won, teams they've blown out. And even against the Dolphins, they got that late touchdown with 4 minutes left to turn a 24-17 game to a 31-17 game that wasn't really reflective of the competitive nature. I'm with you, man. I'm with you on the Eagles. The Cowboys, I mean, it's tough because they're very unlikely to have a home playoff game. So I don't know the expectation. I had this conversation with Herm yesterday. Like, do we call it a 1-horse race, a 2-horse race, or a 3-horse race in the NFC? And if you're having that question and you propose a 1-horse race and everybody knows who that 1 horse is, it's a 1-horse race. It's no longer a 3-horse race. So San Francisco's a kind of in their own tier. And then for me, just because of home field and, the fact that you're going to have probably 2 playoff home games for the Eagles, they're in that second tier. So that's more of the surprise rat. I'm with you. Concerns about Dallas, especially on the road, and how that offense has underperformed on the road. But yeah. I mean, I'm not altogether against the NFC East. That's 2/3 of the contenders. And yeah, the Lions look very strong against the Denver team that's been punching above their weight for a few weeks now. Now the Lions get the Vikings twice in the next 3 weeks. That could be a best of 3 because they could end up playing them in a division round of the playoffs, or the Lions could be going up against the Rams. Matthew Stafford returning to Detroit to try and break hearts in the wild card round. Okay, so you have the NFC East as your rat. I have the Chiefs. Who would have thought? But hey, that's the making of a good rat, right?
That's it. Any team that's going to give up 7.2 yards a carry to James Cook and 6 yards a carry to Ty Johnson, effectively allowing the opposition they could commit a holding penalty on first down every time, and then just run 2 plays with Cook, 1 play with Johnson, and it's a first down without even bringing the chains out. That's a mild issue. Look, Cowboys are a good, talented team, but there's some declining issues on that defense up the middle there that are a huge concern. And the 15-game winning streak at home, they're comfortable at home. They have not afforded themselves that comfortability down the road. This game against the Bills is one. Game against the Cardinals is another. The first game against Philly, 3 massive opportunities, particularly against that, it wasn't close against the Bills, but they had the chance to put pressure on Philly as they go to Seattle with Jalen Hurts under the weather. It looks like he's confirmed. Looks like he's going to be starting despite being under the weather and flying separately from the team. But this was an opportunity, and away from home again, they were exposed. And look, it's a talented football team with a quarterback playing fantastic football bar this week. But if it looks like it and smells like it, walks like it, talks like it. All right. Time for us to get out. We got about 20 minutes left on the clock, maybe about 18 minutes, Phil. So it's time to heat things up. The Hot Take Hotline brought to you by Macca's, and we got a few coming in here. Let me we'll do 2 of these. We've got a couple to pick from right off the top. Let's dive into the MVP stuff. Brock Purdy looks likely to win the MVP. He's the quarterback on the best team in football. So many metrics go his way, all that kind of stuff. But Lamar is way more important than the Ravens. To the Ravens than Purdy is to the finals. That's from 1312 Sports. Phil, what do you think? Purdy, we can put that to the side. He is likely. The odds say he's likely to win the MVP. But Lamar is more important to the Ravens than Purdy is to the 49ers. Hot take, mild take, mid take. I agree with this take.
Yeah, I agree with the take of 1312 Sports. It's like a barbecue sauce with a little kick to it. It's just enough spice. You and I have been been defending Brock Purdy. There's this weird internet contingent that wants to discredit him as completely replaceable. I think if watching the games or looking into the numbers, basically doing anything than retweeting, you would disagree with that take. He's the 3rd 49ers quarterback in a franchise with terrific quarterback pedigree to have 3-4 touchdown, no interception games in the season. We talked about what he's doing throwing outside the numbers, what he's doing moving in the pocket, moving outside the pocket, the pre-snap stuff. I don't think anybody would confuse him with Patrick Mahomes, but this isn't a plug-and-play offense. Nick Mullins couldn't do this there. Sam Darnold couldn't do this there. Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't do this to this level there.
No, he couldn't.
And some of those guys are starting now for teams, and some are chosen starters on other teams. But yes, Lamar Jackson is objectively more important to the Ravens, and he's made himself more important. We saw last season misses, number of games with an ankle injury, and they try and put in Tyler Huntley, who's a mobile quarterback, decent arm, all that. He's not doing what Lamar does. And credit to Lamar. I mean, the reason he fell to the bottom of the first round the year he was drafted, even as a Heisman winner, is can he win from the pocket? Yes. And I was there on the sidelines 2021 when he had that record-setting number of passing yards from the pocket and a come-from-behind win over the Colts at home. And he's only further evolved his game. He's taken the mobility that's made him an irreplicable weapon on designed or improvised runs. He's taken that level of mobility and put it into a pocket space. His ability to keep his eyes downfield, go through his progressions, and those subtle 1 yard here, 1 yard there, sprint forward if a linebacker commits and dump over the top with touch and accuracy, that's what makes him so special and has him being more valuable to the Ravens, yes, than Purdy is to the 49ers in a vacuum. But that says far more about Lamar than it does Purdy. And I've already mentioned Lamar, the one way to beat him, just pressure him, just pressure him, but find a way to pressure him. He was 30th in the NFL in yards per attempt last season when under pressure. This year, he's third. That is another stratosphere, and it's why the Ravens have led an average in a 60-minute game of 44 minutes and 2 seconds per game, and it's why they are deservedly so the favorites to come out of the AFC. So that's a barbecue sauce with a little kick take.
Guess what? We get to see them go at it in a week. So Boxing Day special in Australian time.
Boxing Day by you. 3 NFL games, by the way, next week in that Monday, Tuesday.
Phenomenal. Cannot wait for that. And we get to see. And you know what? I think Lamar has always been in the MVP conversation for me. He's never left that conversation. He doesn't have the gaudy passing stats. Yesterday's a good example. Didn't need them despite playing really good football and having MVP moments for sure, and adding to what his value, like adding to what he does as a passer through what he consistently does on the ground, leading the league in QB rushing. But look, it's a huge, tall task, but if he goes up against that San Francisco 49ers defense, gets a win, has a productive day, and outshines Brock Purdy, that's enough that can swing a narrative with a couple of weeks to go. Massively. Big, tall ask. We'll see what happens. But for me, the conversation with MVP right now deservedly is Brock Purdy. It is Lamar Jackson. You still keep Dak in there because this is not a week 15 award. This is a season-long award. It's an uphill battle. He'd need to go absolute scorched earth the rest of the way, but he should still be in that conversation. And whilst he didn't have a productive day yesterday, if Josh Allen sweeps the rest of the way with some of the teams he's up against, you're going to hear noise there. Okay, let's move on. That wasn't too long. We might have time for all three. Let's see how we go. Right, second, the Browns have to be kicking themselves for moving off Baker and back up the Brinks truck for Deshaun Watson. The current roster plus Baker would have a legit shot at the AFC this year. That was, I'm looking at this as a whole. I don't necessarily think if you take Deshaun Watson out of it, if you're saying, they have to be kicking themselves for moving away from Baker Mayfield, look, he had a perfect passer rating game yesterday. He absolutely lit up the Packers defense that has Packers fans asking Joe Barry still, how are we still here? But in isolation, no, I don't think that, they should necessarily be kicking themselves that they moved away from Baker Mayfield. I don't think Baker Mayfield, despite what's been a strong season and a nice comeback season for him, I don't think he's a franchise quarterback that you're going to depend on to make deep runs the rest of the way. But when you include it with what the other side of the coin is, which is $230 million guaranteed fully to Deshaun Watson with everything off the field, all of that, it brought all of the criticism deserved that it brought, and then the performance that Deshaun Watson has got, which is, please, I don't want to hear about the 12 for 12 that he finished with in the last time we saw him. We have a season full of football from him since coming back suggests that he is not close to worth that as an on-field product. That, yes, I think that decision, if I'm looking at the two, I would be kicking myself as well. It's a decision I never would have made. The Browns did. And I can't imagine that sitting there yesterday, as fun as it's been with Joe Flacco, looking at what Baker Mayfield provided at the cost that he did and what they've got out of Deshaun Watson, if they're really honest with themselves, despite what they've said publicly over and over again I'm talking from the ownership down through the brass at the Browns, they'd be absolutely kicking themselves, and they're stuck with it for some time to come.
And that's the cost of it's not second guessing if you second guessed it at first guessing that they should not have paid Deshaun Watson that much. They shouldn't have given him $230 guaranteed. They shouldn't have given up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third, and 2 fourths. I think I have that correctly. But these are 2 separate takes for me, Laws. Should they have backed up the Brinks truck, appropriately said? For Watson, no. That's a catch-up take. I use that to cool off the spicy take that Baker in Cleveland would have had the same level of success. I disagree with that
Yep.
take. Baker picked a very good day to have a very good day. First ever opposing quarterback to have a perfect passer rating at Lambeau Field.
Correct.
Good on you. No team improved its playoff odds more in terms of percent chance, according to ESPN analytics, this week in the NFL than did the Bucs. Not only getting the win, but doing it over a fellow wildcard aspirant. But last week, a week ago, he went 14 for 29 against Atlanta. The week before that, also 14 for 29 against the Panthers. That's 2 games, sub 50% completion rate. Baker, it was maybe his best game of the season. I know perfect passer rating is imperfect in and of itself. He had a game earlier in the season against the Saints, which has given Tampa the leg up in this NFC South race, I guess you could call it. But Baker had similar numbers, did a little more with his legs. That for me was his best game of the season. This was his second best game. Yes, if he was performing at this level, then that Baker in Cleveland is an AFC title. But the Baker body of work that we've seen does not make the Browns any more of the muscle than they are now with Joe Flacco, who has made them a more formidable opponent than any of the other replacement QBs. All due respect to DTR and Philip Walker, PJ Walker Jr. So yeah, that's this is habanero and ketchup.
Yeah, and hey, look, you want to go out there and mix the sauces around, go for it. You can discover some phenomenal chip dips doing that. But I will say that just remember that the Browns are also playing with backups all across the offensive line. The tackle spot, they've had issues on the interior. This has been a beat-up offensive line. There's no Nick Chubb there, whereas the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line has been relatively solid, and I'd much prefer to be throwing as fine and mercurial as Amari Cooper can be, and David Njoku having some massive spots. I'd much prefer to have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans, the ageless one, and Chris Godwin, the reviving one, going over $150 in this one. It's the scenario for Baker Mayfield to succeed right now offensively actually favors what's going on in Tampa Bay, despite where our expectations were, and the structure that was around the Cleveland Browns in week 1. Okay, I think we've got time to quickly do this last one because I think this one is way out of there. I think we've just accidentally forgot we were pouring hot sauce on top of our meal here while it was going. Ernest, Dan Quinn was the problem in Atlanta, and he's the problem in Dallas. I never liked the hire from day one. Dan Quinn has led a historic league-leading defense for a couple of seasons now. How he was not hired by multiple teams as a head coach is down to some politics behind there. I definitely thought he had an inside. The word was he had a massive inside run at your Denver Broncos before Nathaniel Hackett and a preference for offense came down from the top. He's been rumored and linked as a front runner for a number of other coaching jobs, probably didn't take them, actually pulled himself out of some of them because he recognized that whilst there are only 32 of them, not all head coaching jobs are set up for success. Not all head coaching jobs and opportunities are the same. We'll see if that he will definitely be a name that gets brought up again this offseason. This Cowboys defense is designed to play in front. With Jonathan Hankins out in particular, Marcy Smith, it's been a rough rookie year. You hope he's asking the right questions. He's asking questions of the likes of Micah Parsons, how to become great, how to get better. I just think it's going to take an off season where he should honestly sow his pocket to Micah Parsons' pocket, follow him to every single gym, boxing session, workout session he does, and get an idea for how he can tap into his potential. But look, this team is built to play in front. They're built with a pass rush. The run defense is suspect with or without Hankins in there. Leighton Van Ersch is out. Trayvon Diggs is out. Safeties are starting to get beat up, and Malik Hooker was out of this one. They're not getting that same confident, comfortable 3-man rotation. But no, Dan Quinn is not the problem. Dan Quinn is one of the best defensive minds. He is one of these few minds that, as a former head coach, actually took time away and reshaped what he did. No longer cover 3 Seattle Bible being put out there. He is adapted, throwing man coverage, different looks, disguises. He's become very versatile as a football mind. He's got great bonding and great connection, chemistry with the playing group as well. So no, Ernest, way too hot for me. Way too hot for me. I feel like it might have been an emotional take as well. Hey, look, we're all suspect to the emotional meal after a heavy defeat. We've all been there. I've certainly been there before. This for me feels like a little emotional hot sauce. And maybe after we consumed that, maybe a couple hours later, we were starting to have a little bit of El Regretto.
Yeah, Laws, very simply, Trayvon Diggs' injury hurt them. They shift some of the secondary around, and Deron Bland sets an NFL record for pick sixes in a season. You have Micah Parsons, who I mentioned, Myles Garrett on any given day might be the best defensive player in the NFL. Micah Parsons right there. This game defensively was lost because they gave up Dallas did an average of 2.5 yards per carry after contact. The defensive coordinator's job is to put the people in the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you're getting driven back 2.5
Yep.
yards every time you go to tackle somebody in a game when a team ran the ball with greater frequency than we've seen any
12
team
missed
do
tackles.
this season, full stop, that's not on the guy wearing the headset in the booth. That's on the players. And Micah Parsons and company owned that post-game. It's a welcome wake-up call for Dallas. They'll be challenged again next week in Miami, the team that's 3-4 on the road, the Cowboys. They get perhaps the most incendiary offense in the NFL. I think these teams are still 1-2 in scoring offense per game. Problems in number of areas yesterday for Dallas in Western New York. Dan Quinn's defensive scheme was not one.
No, 12 missed tackles, and Dan Quinn wasn't out there missing them. And anytime you look at a run play and right off the snap, you've got 4 defensive linemen at 4 different levels, separated by about 5 yards. You've got a couple
boneheaded personal fouls. That's not on the DC. Special teams technique is not on the defensive coordinator.
No. Anyway, so a little too hot there, Ernest, although we do appreciate the entry.
It's a great thought for the Hot Take Hotline presented by Macca's. And listen, we want you to push the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to, with this, say, that's a little too much, but here's a truth we can take from it.
Absolutely. Righto, Phil. I've got 4 minutes on the clock here. There's going to be a speed version of a segment that has seen me revive myself through the midway point of the season, but I've started to moonwalk and backtrack just a little bit the last fortnight.
Yeah, Laz is risking a playoff miss, an early trip to the 19th hole. This is Popular Demand, brought to you by Tab, where we give you our best tips for this featured Monday night game, Tuesday midday in Australia and New Zealand. Laz, your cold streak continues, but as does mine. We are down to plus 3.35 units on the year, though you are 4.75 units behind me. Mm-hmm. We both went 0 for 2 last week, spread a little too thin, I reckon. Some bad luck, some bad picks. Laz, get us back on the right track this week.
Okay, the Eagles secondary has been highly suspect. We've touched about it earlier in the show. We've touched on it. We've talked about it. That's how you wind up saying touched about it. The Philadelphia Eagles have allowed a multitude of weapons to produce through the air. It's not just been one person having massive gains. It's been different positions. It's been different alignments. It's been slot receivers. It's been deep ball receivers. It's been tight ends. I'm looking at one, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba for the Seattle Seahawks, over 3.5 receptions. He's cleared that routinely over the last month. You got it sounds like we're leaning towards a Drew Lock start here. Drew Lock at times against this Eagles defensive front, which hasn't been at the heights of previous seasons, but still has talent there. Wouldn't be surprised if he looks to the shorter part of the field, which is where Smith and Jigba, who has out of Lockett and DK Metcalf, the shortest or the lowest number in terms of yards per catch. I've got him over 3.5 receptions at $1.68. Clearly some money moving towards that line. And I think his talent, his quickness, his route savvy, whilst not being an overall burner, I think it matches up well to create, especially if he's working with some of those slot opportunities in an area of the field that the Eagles have struggled in.
Well, Laz, I just got the update from Greg Bell, who works for the News Tribune in Seattle. Geno Smith is trying to warm up. He's doing 40-yard jogs as of 6 minutes ago on the field. It seems like he is trying to have a go, but he's certainly more in doubt than Jalen Hurts on the other side for the Eagles. This line for this game, by the way, 4.5 now. The Eagles are favored in Seattle. Game total is 45.5, and we've touched on this a lot. When the home team is the underdog on Monday Night Football over the last 3 seasons, the game under is 16-4. Well, Oz, I'm going to stick with those Seattle pass catchers for my first prop, and that's Noah Fant over 20 receiving yards at $1.80. This is a number he's cleared each of the last 3 weeks, and so that's a little bit of Geno Smith, a little bit of Drew Lock. Either way, he's getting 2 or 3 catches in that 30 to 40-yard range. You can also get this over 25.5 at $2.20. Just if I'm only thinking somebody's going to catch 2 or 3 balls, for me, that extra 6 yards for an extra 0.4 of a unit, not risk reward I'm going to play with, especially as we are trying to get off the cold streak. So I'll take Noah Fant over 20 receiving yards, 20 plus. So 20 is a hit, 20 plus receiving yards on the alternate receiving yard line at $1.80.
All right. We've got 90 seconds left on the clock. I'm going to move quickly. I put in the rundown for this pick. What was it? I said at $1.30.
Continues. I'm looking at it. I don't know what that means.
The streak continues at $2.35. When I tell you that the quarterback is going to throw an interception on Monday Night Football, I tend to be correct. That streak will continue. So will Jalen Hurts' streak. His last 5 outings on Monday Night Football, he has thrown an interception. 7 of them over those 5 encounters. I think this continues at $2.35. I think a week where he's obviously had a tough preparation, not the usual amount of reps, not the usual amount of time. Could be some chemistry issues. This Seattle Seahawks is not the entire sum of the big name parts that we know it of, but there is enough ball hawking talent and ability to play on the ball to create turnover through the air. So give me Jalen Hurts at $2.35 to throw at least 1 interception.
Laz, we're thinking similarly, and this tends not to go well.
No.
When our minds start to meld, I similarly think that Jalen Hurts he's not fully fit. I think Seattle or the Philly, for 2 reasons, that being one of them, they're going to lean on their run game a little bit more than normal. The other is that this is a Seattle team that ranks dead last in the NFL in EPA per play against the run since the trade deadline. And over the course of the season, only the Panthers have allowed more rushing touchdowns than have the Seahawks. So give me not Jalen Hurts at $1.70 to score anytime, but DeAndre Swift at $2.50. I'm going to take off that debut of the season when he had like 1 carry and 1 catch. He didn't really play in that game. Since then, 12 games, 5 touchdowns. If you were to bet that at $2.50 every week, that's a positive net return, only just. But given the circumstances, given the opponent, I'm going to take a DeAndre Swift anytime touchdown at $2.50. And you have to ask yourself, what are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Well, Phil, we've built a family. We've done hot takes, some hotter than others, some barbecue sauce and some just scorching on the Scoville meter. Is that correct? Did I nail that?
Bring the heat to the hot take.
And then we're trying to bring some heat back to the props, but let's get on out of here. There's 30 seconds left on the clock. Take us home and send us into what could be a very, very enthralling Monday Night Football contest ahead.
You have options on the ESPN family of networks. On ESPN2, the champion Denver Nuggets welcome Luka Doncic and the Mavs to town. And on ESPN, the reigning NFC champs take on the Seattle Seahawks. Monday Night Football, one of the best venues for a game, especially in prime time. And thank you for joining us here on the NFL Brekkie Show. Laz and I, we have a bye week next week, right, for the Christmas holiday. So it'll be the week after we see you. We'll get our props out for certain next week. But thank you so much for watching and enjoying our coverage of the NFL throughout this season. It's the most wonderful time of the year, the business end of the regular season. So we especially appreciate you hanging out with us